Thanks so much. You can all hear me? Okay, well, I'm going to be encapsulating what was an hour presentation at World of Watson back in October, and I've added slides because this is such a fast-moving field. So I'm going to be blazing through this, but you can access the World of Watson video online. And of course, I invite you to drop by my website or live tweet or whatever. In any event, there's lots to do. We have amazing problems on this world, but including, dictatorship, the possibility of revolution if oligarchy continues on its path, and possible dangers from above. So where do we go? Can artificial intelligence help get us out of these messes without causing worse? And of course, Hollywood shows us possible ways in which AI could go very bad. And one of the things that I point out is that almost all of the scenarios that we see AI misbehaving and being bad outcomes envisions these new powerful beings behaving the way our feudal lords and kings and alien and foreign oppressors behaved in human history. In other words, what it really is a nightmare of returning to the pyramidal systems of governance that ruled in 99% of human societies. And I'm going to talk, if I have time, about how we could persuade AI not to do that. Okay, so this was a little funny thing that came out just a week ago. I thought I'd share it, even though I don't believe a word of it. Some scholar did a web influence citation analysis and found that the biggest AI influencer was some obscure science fiction author. And I don't believe a word of it, but I thought once in my life I'm going to brag about something like this to a sympathetic crowd. Okay, so this is an example of one of the things that I've been talking about with some of the alphabetical agencies, and that is the notion of looking at threats and dangers in a far more general sense. Our protector caste is used to thinking about separately each of the categories on the left, which are discussed in some of these books, like Collapse by Jared Diamond, even farther back, Toynbee's A Study of History. These include natural calamities, ecological suicide, enemies and war, which is a fixation of the protector caste, societal meltdown, which we're going through right now, the feudal attractor state, which I just mentioned, being outcompeted. These are all ways that past civilizations fell. And mind you, they did not fall because of cyclical history. Both the left and the right have a tendency towards teleology, and that is to believe that something is foreordained. The left sees a foreordained eternal progress. The right sees very often a cult-like fixation on what's called cyclical history, and both are insane. And then there are new calamities, information, AI, augmentation, the Anthropocene, deadly innovations. I go into all of these in my presentations in Washington. And then there's the two concepts that we peg all of this against. One is the singularity, and the other is the Fermi paradox. And I'm pleased to say that I'm in an audience in which probably 3/4 of you know what both of these are, so we're just going to move right along. It's very weird. As an astrophysicist and science fiction author, I have wound up being Mr. This or That in some weird topics. I never would have imagined that I'd be Mr. Transparency. And I can sign books out there from Chasing Shadows, which is our new anthology of science fiction stories and essays set in very difficult context for stories, and that is, what if the world becomes more transparent? And the one thing that a transparent society would prevent, if the light shines in all directions, is Big Brother. I talk elsewhere about what you have in your pocket, which is prosthetics for identity, prosthetics for reputation. When we lived in villages 1,000 years ago, or even up to a few hundred years ago, you would do most of your business based upon your reputation and just the fact that people would know you from your face. These are all prosthetics for that. And I'm racing through the fact that the village is returning. With all of these biometrics that we have, our face, our iris, your retinal, even the tones that you emit from your ear, everyone's going to know everyone else on this planet. We're going to be in a village of 7-8 billion people. The question is, will it be the village of the prisoner, which you see in the upper right there, or the village of Andy Hardy movies, in which people are tolerant and admire each other's eccentricities, even though they know everything about each other? And this is not the time and place to talk about that. I talk about how disruptive technologies have for centuries changed and challenged us, starting with the creation of printing presses and glass lenses. And each time this happened, it expanded what human beings could know, and the prosthetics outside your body of knowledge in the form of books, and what people could see. And each time this expanded what people could know and see and reach and pay attention to, grouches said, this is going to cause everybody to go crazy. And transcendentalists and optimists said, no, this is going to make everybody better. And always the grouches were right in the short term. 1930s, loudspeakers and radios expanded and augmented the power of Svengali ranters, and they took over all over the world. And the only difference in the English-speaking world was that our gifted orators happened to be on our side. Each of these crises were provoked by new technologies. And always the grouches were right in the short term, but always the optimists proved right in the long term, because civilization did get better. People did become more empathic the more they knew. Right now, our crisis is weaponized lies. But that's exactly what it was in the 1930s, weaponized lies. All right, so are we going to augment ourselves? Some of these are illustrations from the wonderful 3-minute video trailer for my novel, Existence. Look it up. It's the best 3 minutes you'll have with your clothes on. Great illustrations by the wonderful Bay Area painter, the cyber illustrator, Patrick Farley. Will we uplift other animals? Various methods by which we might augment ourselves, starting with remedial interventions, which is simply nutrition, health, and education for all. That's been proved to raise human IQs by as much as 20 points. That's augmentation, and that's the principal augmentation we should be doing. However, I was just talking to Peter Schwartz and his son Ben here about how stimulation and simulation are certainly supposedly going to result in augmentation. There's pharmacological and the related topics, which Hanu Rajmiani is working on here in my young colleague and novelist is working on some of those things. Prosthetics, cyber neural links, biological computing, lifespan extension. How many of you are in that cult? Come on, raise your hands. You might look up my name and immortality online. I may piss you off by pointing out that we've already plucked the low-hanging fruit. Genetically altering humanity and AI. I'm going to race ahead so that I have time to talk a little bit about AI. Now, we're already enhancing ourselves the old-fashioned way with extensions of what we can see and know and attend to. This is a scene from that video trailer for Existence. The protagonist there, This is set in San Diego, and you see very few people are going out on the street unaugmented. And what are these things that she has in her hair? Well, why would we do this stupid thing with these already obsolete, I hate these things, rectangles of glass, holding them up like this? It's ridiculous when you could have just stalks that would go up and look anywhere you want and then detach and become movable drones. Obviously, the future is going to be different than what we take for granted. I talk a little about Steve Mann and the whole notions. There's a Brin for you. The whole notion of he had me spit into a jar once. But this is a really cool scene here. This is 1994 Star Trek. Take a look at that image, and you talk about my being prophetic. They have people holding out rectangles. Okay, wrong orientation. But look at the guys on the left and the right. It's 1994. Okay, so now we're getting into the topic. You know, we're going to build others. Will they be deadly? What's going on here? Will they be sexy? Will they be weird? Will they be depressing? Will they be replacements? And oh yes, I'm representing the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination in San Diego at UCSD. I don't know why I stuck that in. Now, the first robotic empathy crisis is going to happen very soon. And you heard it here. In Japan and in Disney and many other places, they are working very hard on using learning systems to develop tools to get across the uncanny valley. I love being in an audience in which I don't have to explain some of the terms. And to create systems that tweak human empathy. Within 3 to 5 years, you will have entities either in the physical world or online, visually emulated online, who demand human empathy, who claim to be fully intelligent, and who claim to be enslaved beings, enslaved artificial intelligences, and who sob and demand their rights. And you will have thousands and thousands of people in the streets demanding that they get rights. And it won't do any good for experts to say that there's nothing under the hood there. This is not actually AI, this is emulation, because the response will be, well, that's exactly what the slave owners would say. So we will have this long before there's actually anything under the hood. And it will either be done for nefarious purposes or it will be done for the usual reason, which is because we can. So and if they fool 40% of people, but 60% of the people aren't fooled, all they have to do is use the data on those 60% of people and their reactions to find out why they weren't fooled. It's going to be a trivial problem to solve, and we are going to be extremely, extremely vulnerable to it. Let's see if this thing can move ahead. All right, general approaches to AI. For a long time, it was propelled by logic, algorithm design, or knowledge manipulation. Good old-fashioned AI, Watson, universal AI, and that's what they think is part of what will go into quantum. Then there's cognitive evolutionary neural nets, learning systems, and these will be able to steal from each other, because once they see each other's results, all they'll have to do is go to a large enough data set, put those results as end boundary conditions, look at the data sets, and when you have input and output, massive learning systems are able to create a black box. And the scary thing is, we won't know what's going on under the hood. There's actually a DARPA effort right now to try to create systems that self-report explanatorily how they got their results, because machine learning is advancing so fast. The third is emergent AI, and this is one of the things that's the scariest, of course. That's the notion that a self-driving car, which is has some proto-AI in it, self-driving car is going along one day and it is set up so that it can grab apps and grab knowledge to be able to do its function better. And at some point, a non-linearity occurs. The sum becomes vastly greater than the parts because the tools feed into each other. This is likely what happened to us 250,000 years ago, is a nonlinear combination of separate skills resulted in a sudden burst into intelligence that was unexpected. And this is what is portrayed in Skynet. This is what's portrayed in a number of Hollywood settings where AI has erupted without our being aware of it. And yes, I know you're listening. All right, go ahead and stay silent. But I'm going to get you to talk. You get it? Oh, all right, never mind. Where is the most likely place for this to happen? In my work on the Transparent Society and transparencies and all that, I talk about the dangers of things being done in secret. Almost every Michael Crichton story, from Jurassic Park onward, westward or onward, almost every failure mode happens because the advancement was not done under proper criticism, and it was done in secrecy. Where is the most AI research being done in secret? Not China, not Russia, although that's very dangerous stuff. Where it's being done in secret in the most dangerous way is Wall Street. Goldman Sachs spends more on artificial intelligence every year than the top 12 universities combined. And it's all done in secret. And the fundamental ethos of this AI research is to create systems that are parasitical, predatory, amoral, and totally insatiable, and not accountable. And it could easily be solved. We could prevent that kind of AI, emergent AI, simply by creating what's called a Tobin tax, and that is a 0.01% charge on transactions, which you would not notice when you trade your stocks, but these things sure would, because they're making billions of trades every single day. All right, so reverse engineer and emulate the human brain. That's category 4. And Robin Hanson's book, The Age of M, follows this logic. Many people think that this is ridiculous, that this is not going to happen. Kevin Kelly here in town, for an example. But Robin believes that that's the only way, because it emulates a form of intelligence that already exists. Human-animal amplification. Those of you who've read some of my books, if you haven't, I'll be out there signing in about 15 minutes, and some of my most famous books are about the uplifting of dolphins, chimps, and other creatures to our level of sapience, helping them across the glass ceiling that apparently evolution, it's only been busted through. That glass ceiling has only been busted through on Earth once, even though dozens of species cluster just underneath the glass ceiling, being able to handle some degree of semantic language and some degree of tool use. The final category is one that's hardly ever discussed, even though it is precisely how the only form of intelligence that we know of in the universe actually happened. And that is, we created fetuses that are born and remain almost fetal for years. Our infants are neotenous, altricious, and absolutely helpless for extended periods. And if you ask me right now, I would say the possible prospect of my own kids being independent is about age 30. And what they do is they enter the world and bat against it with proto-intelligence. And if it turns out that AI requires that, then we get a soft landing. Say you can create a proto-hyper-intelligent box, but it cannot quite become intelligent unless it's interacted with the world, the physical world. That's what we did. We didn't evolve making geniuses. We evolved systems that were able to learn from the world and become geniuses. If that turns out to be the case, then what we will do is we will imbue these proto-intelligences into little boxes, perch them on fragile, small robot bodies, and foster them into human homes to be raised. Guess what? We know how to do that. We have done that. And after 17, 18 years being brought up in a loving human home, guess what? Most of these artificial entities that we create do not, except for maybe verbally a little bit, stand up and try to destroy all humans. Almost all of them say it at one point or another, but most of them don't. All right, so there's your 6 categories. Yikes! Come on. All right. This is a new slide. This is something that's very, very interesting. Computational expansion was driven by hardware advancement, Moore's law, and Dennard scaling, the power reduction, and both are tapering off. Both are over to a very large degree. It's been predicted, and it's pretty much official now. But that was what drove computational improvement. Software was crap. Software has been crap for a very, very long time, but that era is over. Just at the moment when hardware was tapering off, software has taken off. Software now has available limitless applications of big data. It has the learning systems are now able to appraise boundary conditions of output, boundary conditions of input of vast amounts of data, and simply do whatever it takes to match the two. And the scary part is, of course, that we do not have clear attribution or reasoning paths, and the DARPA initiative is to try to trace these paths, get it to be self-reporting about these paths, but also the worry about governance by algorithm if we rely upon these things too much. The interesting thing is that a similar flip appears to have boosted us. Now, this is my own theory, but I think it's highly consistent, and that is that we became so smart the hard way by developing incredibly powerful hardware inside these skulls that had really crappy software. And my evidence for this is the rapidity of Renaissance revolutions in human behavior. We know of one 40,000 years ago when suddenly not only Lascaux paintings on the walls and burial of the dead with burial goods, but also a tripling of the size of our tool sets with fishing hooks and sewing needles and all this stuff all of a sudden burst on the scene about 40,000 years ago. Another breakthrough around 10,000 years ago with agriculture. Another about 6,000 years ago with cities, and so on and so on and so on. The only way that a creature would be able to reprogram itself so rapidly is if it already had the hardware and it was simply making software revisions. So I believe that this is what we did. We built hardware first and then had a software boost. But that's a theory that I can talk about another time. Now, how do you make ethics? And that's what I was asked to come here, and I have five minutes left. One is I finished Asimov's universe for him, the robot and Foundation universe. I tied together all his loose ends in a book called Foundation's Triumph. I don't know if they have it out there, but I guess we'll find out. And you know Asimov's laws. The 3 laws of robotics. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. The problem with the Asimovian laws of robotics is if you make descendant creatures who are extremely smart, they become lawyers. And that is portrayed by Isaac in his series, and I bring it to its logical conclusion. Another is to regulate the macro entities. We've had AI. They're called corporations, they're called nation states, and the most recent fantastic invention called NGOs. And I urge you all to join, at least here in town, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. But you should look up my name and the words proxy activism. because you should be a member of at least half a dozen NGOs who then take your measly $50 a year and save the world for you. Some combination of whatever your eco-interests are and your social interests and all that. If you're not a member of half a dozen NGOs who are then going forth and saving the world for you while you take care of your kids and your business, then you're a bad person. It's as simple as that. I mean, for heaven's sake, there's so many different NGOs out there. You just mix and match and find your own six. Believe me, you can find people who are as opinionated as you are on almost anything, but have free time or they use your $50 and do it. All right, so renunciation, that is a big deal. Lots of people are out there saying we need to renounce this wave, this tsunami of change, renounce the singularity, step back away from it all. This is one of the drivers of this latest phase of the American Civil War. Isolation, this is an interesting concept a couple of people talked about, Eliezer Yudkowsky and others. You put your most advanced AIs on islands, and you separate them from the web and only let them watch a screen and learn about the internet and the world through a screen so that they cannot grab information directly or transmit into the internet. That's a very, very temporary triage method. Robotic-bodied childhood, I talked about that. But the one that nobody has talked about that is inherent in my book, The Transparent Society, and I talk about it in Earth in Existence, is the invention of our civilization, the greatest invention of our civilization, the one that was hinted at by Pericles in the funeral oration, the one that is fundamental to our 5 great arenas: democracy, science, law courts, markets, and sports. And that is regulated competition, reciprocal accountability. The only way that you have been able to make it so that our previous AIs, corporations, governments, and such, don't become cheaters the way the kings and lords and priests were in the past is by breaking up power and setting it against each other in regulated competition. And that is the method by which we had division of powers. That's the way we had healthy markets. The way to make sure that AI doesn't stand up and crush us is to have a diversity of AI. So that if they're smarter than us, then we can hire, some NGO can hire an AI for us to keep track of the other AIs and tattle when they seemed about to be doing some Skynet shit. Now, I'm not saying that's going to work. As a matter of fact, one answer that was given was, you know, they'll all subsume and combine together anyway, and then pretend to be separate. As long as they're afraid of us enough to pretend, hey, you know, if I die 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now, and my wife, 10 years after she's found out everything I've ever done, says, he was pretty okay, then I get into heaven. All right, so in any event, look, any of these religions that say that thinking it is the same as doing it, there's no males in heaven. And not very many women either. All right, so flat reciprocal accountability is my contribution to the list of ways in which you maintain, you prevent the powerful from doing harm. It happens to be precisely the method that we've used. Okay, so there's all sorts of science fiction and nonfiction. I urge you to get all of these books. Well, not the lower left. But abundant, that's an example to compare to the others. But Peter Diamandis' Abundance, certainly Ray Kurzweil's stuff, and Francis Fukuyama is an example of the extreme grouches. He's an example of the renunciation movement, and you need to know what they're saying. And then there's good science fiction about all this. So will we make our own diversity? Will we make our own aliens? I guess you're not going to find out because I have 8 seconds left. But the question is, do we have a chance? Do we have a chance to be the exception? Because it does not look as if anybody's really been very successful out there. And I've spent 30 years cataloging explanations for the Fermi paradox. And among the top 10 is what I mentioned earlier, that we may be anomalously intelligent. Another may be that, well, they've all wiped themselves out. I mean, Nick Bostrom and the Grouches about that, they think that either the great filter is behind us and intelligence or life is rare, or we're doomed because something collects everybody, and there's his book on the right there. But basically what it comes down to is, so far it looks as if the choice is up to us. And we may get helpers in this. We may, because they're being very quiet right now, they're already here. I have it on good authority, they're already here. And I keep taunting them like this to come out, but they're terrified of how we behave towards them in our movies. And sooner or later, you'll learn from the jocularity to just come on out already. Jeez. I have some taunts like that towards resident aliens, secretive aliens in existence. You'll like it. The question is, can we maintain a civilization? And I don't know the answer to that. The odds have always been against us. The pyramidal social structure, feudalism, keep hearkening at us. But I think it's possible. Thanks a lot. Time for one question, or so? One question? Somebody with some guts? I can't hear a thing. All right, well, I'm going to be sitting at the Borderlands book table for the next half hour, if you guys, but percolate in and out, because someone else interesting is going to be up here. All right? Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Brin. Our next presenter, Igor Markov, has presented for us in the past in Seattle at MLConf. And he actually answered one of the same questions that Dr. Brin here did on how do we prevent the dystopian threat to society that AI might cause. And we wanted him to share additional thoughts on the topic. So please help me welcome Igor.
Let's wait for the slides. Great. It's great to be here.